Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Revere podcast. Today I'm joined in person by Billy. Billy, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, good. It feels a bit weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's different surroundings.
Obviously, when we started the podcast, we were in the midst of a lockdown, and yeah, we feel like we've got the opportunity to do this now. So,
and it should hopefully be a different setup. Like I say, we're trying our best Peter Crouch podcast impressions.
well, we're musicians, so theoretically, audio should be the best part of this podcast, but unfortunately, due to technical difficulties at times, that hasn't quite been the case. But yeah, we've got the sort of compulsory Norwich City flag that everyone got with their £50 membership. That's a little bit sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's not staying there.
Great £50 spent.
Yeah. Got some artwork in the background as well. So hopefully this backdrop will improve as we progress through. But
in terms of a starting point then, to kind of get into the juicy part of the podcast and talk about Norwich City, obviously we're in the midst of an international break, and following our podcast with Ben Ambrose, we haven't really had anything to speak about in terms of any new, fresh Norwich news, apart from a couple of player departures and whatnot. But in terms of like a brief summary of where we stand currently, so right now, we, after 4 games, have 4 points. So that was a win against Huddersfield on the opening day, 1-0. Then a 2-2 draw to Preston, followed by, what was even the game after that?
2 1-0 losses, isn't it?
2 1-0 losses. Bournemouth away and then Derby at home as well. And our goal difference is -1.
Not great, is it?
Which is what I wanted to kind of add in there. Bill, what has the start been like?
Mediocre. Like, it's 4 points from 4 games. It's the type of form that probably just about keeps you up in the Premier League, but it's certainly not enough to mount a promotion push at this stage. I mean, it's early doors, and sort of we'll get into, I suppose, more of the juicy stuff. But I suppose in terms of a summary, yeah, like it hasn't been great. It's been fairly mediocre at times. There's been signs that Norwich are going in the right direction. There's also been a lot of signs that Norwich City are still stuck, sort of in last season mode, I suppose. Like they're still suffering the effects of that. I mean, it's hard to be too critical because there's just so much going on right now. I think we probably, when we planned to do this podcast, we probably expected that there'd be a little bit more transfer news. Obviously, Ben Godfrey's gone, but we've sort of covered that. We thought maybe there'd be a bit more around sort of Max Aarons, Todd and Emmy, but that hasn't really been the case. So there's a lot going on at Norwich. Not all of it is sort of great. It's too early maybe to make conclusions, but I think we can certainly sort of discuss what's gone on so far.
In terms of, just before we kind of look at the individual games as a whole and performances and whatnot, what are your thoughts on, I do find a lot of people are kind of using our poor start to almost like an advantage in terms of the way that we went up previous under Daniel Farke, and we had a way worse start than what we have this year. Do you think it's the same circumstances?
No, you know me, I don't like talking about that title-winning season for a number of reasons, sort of good or bad, I suppose, if you want to sort of hype up a player like Stiepermann, or if you sort of want to talk about maybe, like how we didn't start great in that season. The dynamic and the context is completely different, and look, we might go on and win the league and do all that again. I can't sit here and say that's what I'm presuming will happen or predicting will happen. But I don't like sort of comparisons to that season, regardless of the context. And I think that's just wishful thinking. In all honesty, like what happened in that season, from the turn of events to the form that we picked up, was seldom seen at Norwich City in terms of our lifetime. Like we'd seen the Lambert rise. And that was an exponential rise, wasn't it? But we hadn't seen all of a sudden this team just turn into this like well-oiled, like fluid attacking system, and that Farke got out. And I don't like the comparisons at all. In all honesty,
I think it's always worth noting, like you said, that when we went into that season, we were the 14th best team in that division. We'd just lost our best player to probably
2 of our best players.
Yeah,
maybe even 3 if you want to count Angus Gunning as well.
And I think that's the thing as well, is that we severely had a weaker squad, on paper, of course, in hindsight, but we were not a threat to the title at all. In fact, I remember having conversations where we were thinking, oh, this could be a kind of go back to League One and reset kind of campaign. And I think the difference is now is that the players that kind of grew up through that season, like your Max Aarons, your Jamal Lewis's and whatnot, and really kind of flourished into these players. They were nobodies back then, Like when Max Aarons started, I think his first game away at Ipswich, it was like, who's this kid? And now everyone knows who he is. Everyone analyzes his game, and everyone knows how to kind of line up against these players and what to expect. And I think, despite the quality they have, it's going to be so much more evident that every team that faces us is going to want to beat us so much more than what they did previously.
Yeah, there's a number of factors. I mean, one thing that I really remember from that period is I think Webber was sort of posed a question like, how come like Aarons, Lewis, all these young players, and then also players like Zimmerman, Tribal, Pookie, who have no experience in the Championship, how come they can just go out and and play the way they do? There's a bit of a myth in the Championship that you need sort of players who've been there and done it, and we sort of ripped that all up. And Webber was basically saying that these players haven't been to the Rotherhams, the Burtons, the Stokes, the Millwalls. They haven't had to deal with that. They haven't been scarred by that side of the Championship, but they have now.
Yeah.
In a way, they've been through a Premier League relegation, which was catastrophic, as we all know, and I just think there's a number of factors that are different from that season. But for me, they know Max Aarons that season. I think he lost about 2 or 3 football matches. Like he never really experienced that side of it, and all of a sudden it was week after week just getting battered, in all honesty, and just getting pushed to the floor. And I think the scars are still showing to quite an extent. I think they can heal, but I think it might take more time than people predict.
No, I definitely agree. And I guess if we try and kind of look into this a bit more in depth and try to discuss positives for a start.
Yeah.
Now, going into this, obviously we kind of don't know. I know there's not a huge sample size to kind of go off, but what we've both answered for these questions. But if we look at the most pleasing performance so far in terms of a team performance, what game are you picking for your best performance so far?
It's hard, isn't it? Because I'm always one where if we're looking at the performances, I try to not look at the result. If we're looking at the result, it was Huddersfield. I think we can all agree that wasn't our best performance.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd be inclined to say either Derby or Preston. Like I'm not saying that like any of those were a brilliant day out for Norwich, but I think it was such fine margins in that game, wasn't it? Norwich. If we look at both those games, obviously the Skip penalty, which is never a penalty in a million years. Okay, like I've spoken about it on My Football Writer, that I think Skip shouldn't have been beaten in terms of the run, but the actual foul that he apparently so committed was never a foul. So it's moments like that. It's moments like Pookie missing a penalty and then Wayne Rooney just bending one in the top corner. It's such fine margins. We know that the Championship has those margins, but I do think there's a possibility we could be sat here maybe in the next international break, maybe with that other side of it. Maybe we did get that penalty. Maybe we did put that penalty away. Maybe the free kick doesn't happen. There's just so many elements that, okay, yeah, it's if, buts and maybes, but I generally don't think we're too far away. But I suppose in terms of answering the question, I'd probably have to say Preston, just because we scored 2 goals. But that's probably goes against the point that I've just previously made. But yeah.
So I think, in all honesty, given time to kind of reflect on the performances, I generally think that all performances have been pretty positive. I don't think there's been a really bad performance.
There hasn't been a Millwall away like there was in Farker's first season.
And that's good in my eyes, because, it is, looking at last season where we had so many, it would have been quite easy to kind of, for a lot of these players to kind of sit back and give out that same level of performance again, right? I think, in my eyes, it would be between the Preston and the Derby game. I think the Bournemouth was a good performance, but I think there wasn't as many moments where we could have scored or could have created. I just thought we looked quite...
we didn't create as many chances.
Yeah, we just looked quite dull going forward, and I think Bournemouth did deserve to win that because of Dan Juma's moment of brilliance. But if not, it was a really dull 0-0 game, to be honest with you. I think the reason I'm going to go for Derby over Preston is because of the fact that, honestly, I thought defensively we were absolutely fantastic. And I think we didn't necessarily show the same against Preston at home. I thought we were a little bit wobbly defensively. Yeah. And I thought Ben Gibson, as I said on my other podcast, was fantastic. Yeah. And I thought as a back four, they looked very, very good. And I think if you take away, like I say, the Pookie slip and the David Marshall unbelievable save away, right at the end, really. You know, and you've got yourself maybe a 2-0 win, and you're sitting there thinking, wow, what a performance, clean sheet, 2 goals, but it wasn't that. And, no. We know it's not the case, and, as much as football's a results business, I do believe that you've got to take positives out of the fact that we looked like a very good structured team in terms of the way we we defended. One criticism we've always said is how, as a team structure, we've always defended in whether it be zonal marking or just the way that naturally we kind of defend, it doesn't really make any sense because we just concede so many goals. But I felt like not that there's a turning point, because Derby didn't really press us to a degree, but I still felt like that was a really positive sign of what might actually be to kind of coming from our new defence, if you like. But I don't know if you had anything else to kind of add to that.
I'd agree. I think that Derby game was probably the most impressive we looked defensively. I would be wary of getting too excited. I think Derby, they pretty much admitted that they came to set out to park the bus. That was their game plan. The way they played, they did. Rooney was starting up in that forward position, but he was essentially playing as like a false nine and bringing the other players into play, and then the wingers were trying to get beyond Norwich's defence. But agreed, I really liked the look, not only of that back four and sort of taking into consideration Tim Krul, but also the two players in front of them, Ollie Skip and Lucas Rupp. I was really impressed with both of them. Yeah. And we've got a few questions where maybe those two might come up in a moment, so I won't go too in depth about those two. But I like the defensive structure I suppose maybe more than the actual back four.
In terms of looking at like the most disappointing, now I know we kind of, at least I mentioned that there hasn't really been a stinker in there. But in terms of, like, for me, my most disappointing one was probably Bournemouth.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I think, for me, whenever you come down, it's that first match-up with a team that's come down from the Premier League is really to see who's reacted or bounced back better. And I think it does help self-consciously to kind of win a game like that, or at least compete in a game. And we definitely did that, don't get me wrong, but I just felt like the whole game, Bournemouth looked like the kind of better team.
It felt like a 6-pointer, like, stupidly early on, didn't it?
Like 100%. I just thought that it almost made me a little bit upset to a degree that they had that extra bit of quality that I kind of envisioned that we had. Like they had that kind of that player who could make something happen, and the whole game we didn't have that. I thought we did, to be fair to us, we defended very well, and we did control possession, and we tried to create chances, but I just felt like, and it might have partially been down to the way that we set up with a very kind of defensive 4-1-4-1, to be honest, at the start. And I think, to be fair, there was a lot of stuff going around which we didn't know before kickoff about Todd Campbell and Buendia, which come to light, which could have affected that performance. But I just think, looking back now, if you get a point out of that, or you come away with a win, what a result to catapult your season, Yeah. But I mean, I don't know if you have it for similar reasons or whatnot.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree. I think I didn't watch that game as in depth as the others, but yeah, I mean, you talk about Dan Juma, that's probably what £15 million gets you in all honesty, exactly. Isn't it? And we don't have that. We can't afford to make those type of transfers, and Bournemouth have been a Premier League side for far longer than we have, so it's an interesting one. I think that Bournemouth performance probably was the most disappointing. I think there was elements of the Huddersfield game which I would probably put into that bracket, but the fact we won that it would be a little bit harsh because we did come away with the 3 points, our only win of the season. So yeah, I'd probably agree with the Bournemouth game.
In terms of just generally talking about the other kind of couple of games, which at least I haven't mentioned yet, but mainly the one that we both have mentioned, the Huddersfield game. Just to kind of, because at the end of the day, it's been a little while since we've spoke about that result. And obviously, put it into perspective, it's not under our most kind of pleasing team performance or disappointing, but obviously it was our best result, right? In terms of, I guess, a reflection upon that, do you feel like looking, because I think when we both watched that game live, we kind of said we really didn't play well, but we got the points, and that's what you need to do at this kind of level and starting off. Do you feel like we should have kind of looked at that a bit more in depth and gone, actually, we really look quite far off the pace right now? Or do you feel like that was just one of those games where we, dug in and got the points?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because there's so many things in that game. Like, I think we should have. I think was that the game where Farker was told by the ref that the referee admitted it, that he basically
2 penalties,
made a mistake regarding 2 penalties. Saying that, Richard Stearman puts it on a plate for Pookie, who then also puts it on a plate for Ida. So I don't know. I don't want to get too maybe caught into that. I think there was signs that like I say, there's so many signs for me that the Norwich are still suffering from their Premier League hangover, and I think that was probably the game where it was most evident. In all honesty, saying that. We got the goal, which was, we made Stearman make that mistake, and maybe his lack of fitness affected it. I don't know, but yeah, I think there was both signs for me that we shouldn't have got too, maybe not carried away, but because I don't think anybody did really get carried away.
No.
There's also elements where I think actually you look at that game and it's. I think you look at Adamida and the fact he still hasn't yet made a start. Maybe that's just me being biased. I don't know, and whether that will change post international break. We'll see, but I think he must be feeling a little bit unlucky that he hasn't made a start yet. But yeah.
Before we kind of look at individual performances, I just want to kind of ask one more question, and it's to do with the start we've made, and just to kind of get your take on it. Do you feel like us making a bit more of a slower start is more likely to kind of help us in the long run as opposed to hitting? Because we all know that we have a point. Every team does it in every season where you have one kind of spell, maybe it would be 5-10 games where you struggle or pick up some draws. In the year we went up, we had it obviously at the start and even at the end when Emi Buendia was out with his suspension and we just couldn't get over the line. Do you feel like this could almost be detrimental that we've kind of made this tough start to potentially going up at the end of the season, or do you feel like this is just going to be most likely a step too far this year and almost shows signs of us having to rebuild like in the 2017-18 season when we had obviously Farker come in and we finished 14th?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I'm not writing off like us getting promoted. Like I think we have the squad and we have the quality. But yeah, like I'd agree. I am looking at sort of the bigger picture and how Norwich going about it. We spoke about it with Ben, like what is the narrative that's surrounding Norwich, which is a really interesting question. I'm not it's probably a little bit wishful to think, okay, we've made a bad start and we'll find our form, because we don't know. It could be mid-table mediocrity again. I think we've got too much quality. I think we will be in the top half. I just think it's going to take us a while. Saying that, we know how reliant this side and this team is on confidence. It's a very different team to well, in some parts to the 2018-19. But if this side wins a game of football, you do generally think that or feel like they could push on, and if they get a run going, and it was that 1-0 win against Middlesbrough that propelled the season that we had under Farker in his second year. So I don't know. Like there's the. I don't think we're going to win the league and storm it like we did last time. I think we can still get promoted. I think we have the quality to. But winning games of football is always a good thing, and unfortunately we haven't won enough of them so far.
No, absolutely not. In terms of kind of like, we've kind of discussed the opening 4 games, and like I said, we've already kind of gone over them before, but if we look more at kind of like the individuals of that, or those games, is there, not necessarily one, but is there multiple kind of people that stand out for you in your eyes?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because like, you have got to caveat all of these questions, haven't you, with the small sample size, but I think the one player who sticks out for me, and I presume that you'll agree, is Oliver Skipp.
Yeah.
He has played. He started in all 4 games. I don't think he's come off at all, has he either? So
no.
He's got the full 90 minutes in all of them, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't think he's been necessarily man in the match in any or if any of those games. People probably disagree. In terms of what I think. I know he did get man of the match on Twitter, but let's be real, that was because Tottenham fans hijacked it. But yeah, he's been the most pleasing performer for me for a number of reasons. I've spoken a lot about how I think a lot of that is due to the novelty factor of having somebody who is of that calibre in that position. we've had Tribal, who's probably been the most pleasing performer in CDM over Farker's 3 and a bit years now. But for me, Skipper's just been a rock, hasn't he? There's a lot of learning. He's made a few mistakes. He's still getting to grips with certain aspects of playing in that position, and there's sort of nuances within that, isn't there? We're seeing how he's dropping in between the centre backs as well, which is a really interesting point. I don't think we ever really saw Tetty do that, did we? Maybe that says more about Tetty than anything. But yeah, Ollie Skip for me.
I think the nice thing with Ollie Skip is that there was a lot of expectation in my eyes when he first joined, because I guess a player I kind of accompanied him to being similar to a degree is almost like an Ethan Ampadu in the way that, like you say, he can kind of drop in between those centre backs and distribute the ball whilst also being able to kind of move into that central defensive midfield.
It could have been Ethan Ampadu that we're talking about right now.
And that's the thing, right? And so for me, I think, and yourself, we always talked about having that kind of player that could do that. And I think coming into this team, there's a lot of expectation and kind of anticipation as well from me to see really if he was as good as kind of what Jose Mourinho made him out to be. And he's been fantastic. And I think it would be a shame for us not to fully utilise his potential this year, because honestly, a player like that, you're not going to get every year. And if you don't take advantage of a player like that while you have him, it does make me a little bit nervous that we don't really have a single player in the squad that's remotely close to him from that we've seen so far. There is obviously, Jakob Lungi Sorensen that we haven't seen yet, and that's what I'm saying. With 4 games in, it's just early days right now, but I can't see anyone really putting much of a case forward to replacing Skip at the moment. He's been a rock for us. Of course,
I'd agree.
He's had the one mistake against Preston, which honestly, 9 times out of 10, you're not even looking at because it's not a penalty. But still, obviously, you could case an argument for a little bit of naivety or lack of experience in the way that he kind of, the way he made himself look to the referee to justify that. But even that, in my eyes, is kind of really stretching, to be honest. Yeah. I think one person you'll also agree with me with, which is pretty much standing right next to him, is Lucas Rupp. I've been so impressed with him so far.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to, and what I was going to ask you was actually who you think has bounced back, or who looks the best from the relegation. And my answer would again be Lucas Rupp, because I thought he was, in the nicest way, awful in the Premier League. But he looks like a completely different player. And I want to hear your kind of opinions on him, because I know that you got quite a lot of stick for for him, pretty much.
He's aged well.
But what do you think about his first 4 games?
Yeah, like sometimes we know as Norwich fans, players are scapegoated. They're used. We've seen Ruddy, we've seen Martin, we've seen the Murphy twins. Maybe at times we've seen Cantwell. Like there's always a scapegoat, and Lucas Rupp was used as a stick to sort of beat Webber with, in terms of, from the fans' perspective, in terms of the recruitment and the quality of recruitment last year. When you're looking at it and you've signed 2 players or 3 players on a permanent, Lucas Rupp, Josip Dermich and Sam Byram. Interestingly, Sam Byram doesn't get the same criticism. At least Lucas Rupp is fit, with all due respect. So I think Lucas Rupp, it was a little bit harsh. He was played out on the right. He was almost used as like this backup to Windir, which was a sort of perplexing decision by Farker. I think that doesn't help. If you say to Ollie Skip, go and play on the right side of midfield, we're not talking about him being the best performer. And also, you're talking about Lucas Rupp, like, even if he can operate on that right-hand side, trying to deputise for not only Norwich's most creative player, but one of the most creative players in the league. So it was a real tough ask from Lucas Rupp. I think at times he did show his quality. But yeah, it was a disappointing year, like it was for many. But I said after the Luton game, I thought he was really impressive, and I think I spoke about it in a recent My Football Right article as well, actually, that he almost seems to be a little bit of a mix between Vrancic and McLean. I think McLean is almost too frenzied and is too hyperactive on the ball in a weird way. He's so buzzy and he's so energetic, and unfortunately that's not really what Farker wants from a midfield player. I think in the Premier League it was obviously beneficial because we were defending a lot of the time, but in Lucas Rupp they have a player who has that energy and physicality that McLean offers in the middle of the park, but also, he doesn't have the same technical quality as Vrancic, but he's proven this season he can play. And I don't think Lucas Rupp is going to get a bag full of assists this season, but I think he's going to be a very useful number 8. And I think look, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a brilliant signing, but I think Webber's coming out of that okay now, and it's a shame that Lucas Rupp was maybe one of the only signings, certainly in terms of a transfer fee we made, because Andre Duda isn't here to get that same stick. You know, he's gone back to Germany, and it's harsh for Rupp because he's sort of got to pick up the pieces, I suppose, and he was that poster boy, or if you like, of the recruitment, and I think Lucas Rupp will have a good season.
Yeah, I definitely go. I think, unfortunately for him, there was a lot of questions around him, even with regards to how we recruit normally, to even like as far down as the age of him when we signed him. And I think the problem is for him was that there was so much things suggesting why we shouldn't sign him as opposed to why we should when he first arrived. And I'm very glad to see that he's kind of coming out of it, like I say, on the other end, and hopefully he can have a chance to really flourish, because theoretically playing for Hoffenheim for so many years and in European tournaments and whatnot, that it should really shine through the quality that he has, and I think that will show this year, and I'm very excited to kind of see how he plays.
The thing as well with Lucas Rupp, like, he was only signed for what, like £500,000, which isn't a lot of money. If I'm not sure how sort of accurate these rumours are, but supposedly Norwich wanted to buy him for about £5 million the year before, which I don't know if I believe, but I think that's probably a little bit over-exaggerated, but I think Norwich probably would have been interested in him. Yeah. I think if we sign Lucas Rupp on a free transfer, I think the context around it is so different. The fact we paid a fee for him probably harms him in a way, but I think you've got to look at that fee, and there's not a lot of money. It's a sort of transfer you see sort of being thrown around at the lower echelons, if you like, or the lower tier of Championship football, and the fact we've picked up a player with Bundesliga experiences is good. But yeah, I mean, I'm not getting carried away with Lucas Rupp. I just think he's been a real pleasing performer.
Do you feel like there's anyone else at all from the main, I guess, bulk of the squad which come down, which have painted themselves in a good light since they've come down at all? Is there anyone else that we're missing?
So in terms of
from
last season,
yeah. So from the main core of last year. So for example,
don't know if I'll be able to do that. Hopefully not.
One person I kind of like to mention, if we're talking about individual performances, is Marco Stiepermann versus Derby.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Marco Stiepermann, because I think it's you'll know too well that I'm not really a Stiepermann fan, and I wouldn't say like I dislike him as a player. I just think his impact isn't as felt in games anymore for a number of factors, which I'm not going to get into now. But I think Marco Stiepermann has a lot to prove, and it'll be interesting to see the role he plays. I think Dowell's injury has opened the door for him in a way, as will a departure of either Todd or Emmy. So Stiepermann's got a point to prove. That rain is relentless, isn't it? Hopefully you can't hear that. Hopefully it won't last long. But yeah, I think there's a lot to prove for Stiepermann, and we'll see what he does for the rest of the season.
Well, apologies for that.
Bit of a rain check.
Yeah, we just happened to record in the middle of what seems to be like some kind of torrential rain. So, in terms of and there we go again. In terms of what we were talking about with Marco Stiepermann, and the reason I kind of raised a point about him, it was purely because, and it's a very early doors, I guess, acknowledgement for him, because he's only really featured in the Derby game, which we lost. So effectively, you kind of be looking at that performance and thinking, okay, why are you kind of saying he had a good individual performance? But I felt like what I really enjoyed from him was the fact that I almost saw the kind of play that we saw last year between Pukki, whoever was on the left, Todd really in the Premier League, so more so O'Neill, Stiepermann and Buendia. That kind of fluid football in the final third, I really felt like I saw that come back, like the 1-2s, the quick flicks behind, and the fancy kind of little play. I feel like he is almost, in a really weird way, the centerpiece to all of that happening, and I'm really kind of keen and eager to see how he transpires in the the coming kind of weeks of the season, to see how he's used, because obviously until Dowell's back, with the kind of news that we haven't really looked to replace anyone in that
doesn't look like
that
it, does
position, I can't see anyone else really operating that role.
And also the thing as well with Stiepermann, I still can't really gauge the formation we played against Derby. It was like a mix of like a 4-2-3-1/4-3-3. But I did like how he was operating a little bit deeper. I think Stiepermann does have an aerial presence, but like how often have we actually seen Stiepermann use that to his advantage? Like even during the sort of prolonged attacking phases of play in our title-winning season, it was Stiepermann almost got out of the way of the space in the middle and allowed the more sort of technically proficient players to operate. So how Stiepermann is used will be interesting. I almost think he'll be used in sort of tandem with Vrancic, and then it'll be Rapp and McLean on the other side in terms of you've got maybe more, I wouldn't really say Vrancic is a 10, but the more progressive players in Stiepermann and Vrancic on one side, and maybe a bit more of the sort of disciplined, hard-working midfielders in Rapp and McLean. But how that dynamic of the midfield sort of develops as the season goes on will be really interesting. And it'll, like I say, it'll be interesting to see sort of the role Stiepermann plays, because he has got a point to prove. I think in times it was unfortunate. He was unlucky and unfortunate, Stiepermann, in the Premier League campaign, because he was one of many players that didn't turn up, and was, Norwich were evidently frustrated at the lack of goal contributions from that position, and it was sort of blamed on him, which I thought was a little bit harsh. I mean, he had a few stinkers and stuff, but I'm intrigued to see what happens with Stiepermann.
Yeah, I think, in all honesty, the best thing, in a weird way for him, was the fact that we did so bad, because I think when he was kind of ousted of the squad...
He was a victim to that, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think when he was kind of ousted of out of the squad quite early on in the year, I think it was clear that we kind of had this vision that he was not the reason for it, but one of the kind of contributing factors to it. And I think it's kind of been shown evidently from there that there was a lot of players that really didn't help out in that scenario, which is why we kind of ended up in such a horrific way kind of getting relegated.
I do think Norwich also wanted to bring in a sort of Stiepermann deputy as well in that summer, and obviously they weren't able to do that for whatever reason. I think Stiepermann was so integral to that second season under Farke, and unfortunately we didn't really have like a natural replacement for him to go in. Like we saw McLean operate there, we sort of saw like a more of a 4-1-4-1, didn't we, again in certain games, which I really want to try and forget, especially that Man United game.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's where Norwich struggled the most in terms of replacing him.
In terms of the players that haven't come out of this the best, and whether that be new players or kind of players that really haven't been able to turn around their kind of rot of form since the Premier League, who are your main ones to stand out in that?
One springs to mind, unfortunately, and that is the man up top, Pukki. I don't think we've seen anything near his best form. There's been times he's obviously got the goal, which was probably should have a Declan Rice assist under it.
They gave him the goal, didn't they?
yeah. I think just about. But like I say, if it didn't have a Rudd assist on it, then I think that was a little bit harsh. But and we've also seen him get the assist for Ida, although arguably shows a bit more of a lack of confidence than anything. I don't know. It's a tricky one. That it splits opinion. And we also saw him play that really nice ball to Hernandez, which was, if it wasn't for sort of last-ditch defender by Derby, probably would have ended up in another assist. So, like, I've said this before about Pukki, in terms of him contributing to Norwich's build-up and like he's still that same player. What we're not seeing from Pukki, like we hoped we would, is those sort of darting runs in behind and those almost like first-time finishers, like they just fly into the back of the net, don't they? Almost like along the ground or on the floor. We haven't seen anything like that, and he's really missing his potency in front of goal and his confidence and that sort of relentlessness of just like he's just going to find a way. Almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Like he's quite unconventional the way some of his finishes before, and we're just not seeing anything like that. We thought maybe it's harsh because if Pukki scores against Preston and he follows that up by a goal at Derby, maybe the rhetoric changes and maybe it's a different story, like I say. But looking at it more holistically, he hasn't been great, and it's a little bit harsh because I don't want to turn Pukki into a scapegoat. But that's the first one. That's the first player that comes to mind when answering that question.
Just one very quick question, because I think what always I have to mention with Teemu Pukki, which I kind of have seen this year, And likewise to what you mentioned, if he flicks that last minute chance in and Declan Rice doesn't save it, we win the game and he's the hero.
It's another one, isn't it?
If he scores that penalty against Derby, he's sitting there with 3 goals and we're sitting here with, 6 more points, right? Or 5 more points technically. So I know it's a lot of ifs and buts, but I guess the big thing is for me right now is, do you almost feel like with the fact that we've now signed a player like Jordan Hugill and we have another kind of bigger or more physical striker in Adam Eder, and the way we're evidently trying to play now with Xavi Quintilla balls into the box and a kind of heavy emphasis around, using almost like a target man up top, do you feel like he's just not meant to succeed in this current system that we're playing?
Yeah, certainly in the current system, and certainly in the current role he's played. Like I said, I think utilising Pukki maybe as a bit more of a number 10 could be beneficial.
Yeah.
It's almost, square pegs and round holes at the moment in terms of the way Norwich are trying to play with the centre forward that they have. Like, there's no point trying to pick up Pukki in the box, really. Like, aside from that sort of goal against Preston, which, Ben Ambrose said on the last podcast, it's almost annoying that he scored that because Pukki isn't a target man. He isn't sort of adept or competent in the air. That's not what he's good at, which is interesting because we do have 2 players on the bench
who can fit that role.
Who do fit that role, and I think it's a matter of time until one of them makes a start. And if you ask me which of those two I prefer, then the question answers itself. But unfortunately, I do think it's just a matter of time now until one of those gets the nod up front.
Yeah. I think unless overnight he decides to turn his 2 headers in his Norwich career to about 50, I can't really see him.
If he just finds that confidence again and finds that form, I think that'd be enough for Farke to sort of rip up the blueprint of it, or this, in terms of the way Norwich want to play, and they'd scrap the whole crossing idea and just try and thread balls into Pukki again. But no.
In terms of, I guess, more kind of disappointing performances, I guess a player I'd like to point out for really the first couple of games was Christoph Zimmermann.
He's another one that springs to mind, isn't he?
I think it's tough with him because I do think he played very, very well against Derby, and I don't want to discount that or discredit that. And, the way you can look at it is that he's only in the last 2 games conceded 2 goals, and I know we've lost in those games, but it's not his fault that Pukki misses a penalty and that we're squandering chances. Again, when we went up last year, we could concede 3 goals in a game and we'd expect to win it, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the way he's kind of always been in our team is that, we'll outscore the opponent. And I think, to be fair, if you're a defender in this Norwich side, you're almost, to a degree, allowed to make mistakes, which is really bizarre to kind of say out loud. But I think it was more so analysing his performance, and I saw a stat line from the game against Derby which really highlighted this to me, and it was Ben Gibson's pass success rate. And don't get me wrong, right? We played a team that really sat back. There wasn't a huge amount of pressure, but he still made 90% of his passes.
Yeah.
I can't remember which game it was now, whether it was the Huddersfield game, I think we analysed it, where he had a 71% pass success rate.
Yeah.
And you have to look at really the way we've been playing. And when you're in that back line, you don't really have a lot of pressure on you for passes. And I wouldn't really say that the difference between what Ben Gibson faced in his debut versus what Zimmermann played against was really to make a difference of that extra, kind of percentage difference which he had. And I think it just proved to me more so that his ability to play as a ball-playing centre-back, if Ben Gibson can take that responsibility away, I think we'll be absolutely fine.
I think Ben Gibson has a massive impact on Zimmermann, and I think we'll see that throughout the season. I've spoken a lot about how that left-footed centre-back really helps sort of build up play, and there's been a few occasions, notably when Dan Juma scored that goal. If you actually rewind the play, the opportunity is created because Zimmermann plays a pass to Godfrey, and it was a bit of a tricky pass to deal with, but Godfrey has to play it with his left foot, which is weak foot, and it gets kept in by, I think, Jack Stacey, and then the ball progresses to Dan Juma, and he leaves Zimmermann for Cole, doesn't he? I mean, it's a bit. I've spoken about this before. I'm apprehensive to be too critical on Zimmermann. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because I feel the profile of player he is. We see this with these big, tall central defenders, these 6'4", aerially sort of dominant. It takes them a bit of time to get into their stride in terms of their physical performance. I'm talking about the pace and stuff like that, and how fit they are. It takes them a little bit longer than those sort of nimble attacking players. But I think his performances, you will see an improvement with Ben Gibson. Ben Gibson has been there, done that, hasn't he, in terms of this level and further on. He's somebody which will instill confidence into that back four, and I think we could see similar performances of that title-winning season under Zimmerman, and hopefully he gets back to that type of form. If you believe the rumours, then it looks like obviously Norwich wants to replace either internally or externally the departing Tim Closer, which I think, just to quickly mention, I think we can both agree that's a good deal.
Yeah,
in terms of,
I think for us it's a very good deal,
and also for him as well.
Yeah.
I don't think Tim Closer is anywhere near it. So, how Norwich replace Closer is an interesting one. And Zimmerman has obviously got the nod at the moment, but you've obviously got Hanley waiting. How reliable Hanley is, unfortunately, it's another one of those, isn't it? It's a player whose Norwich City career has predominantly been plagued with injuries.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting as well to see kind of who potentially gets that, because it's very evident that we're going to need extra cover. Because if you look at last season, we had too little, and now we've got a player less in that role in a season which is longer. So when you look at it on paper, you think, what is going on, right?
Although, Alex Tetty as a centre
half, I think the thing is for me, right, is that obviously I've seen links to players like William Saliba, who I think would be such an exciting loan signing to get.
Yeah.
But again, there is an argument of whenever you bring a loan player in, I do generally feel like the problem is that you kind of can only really bring them in with certain promises of playing time and whatnot.
And if you believe what Arsenal want from this loan move, it looks unlikely that they want Saliba to come straight in.
Yeah.
And I don't think Saliba or Saliba, however you pronounce it, is coming straight into this back four at the moment.
I think that the thing is for me is that if you
That's
look
not
at
how it works at Norwich, is it,
Well, I think if you look at it as well from an outside perspective, right, and the way that we promote through, it's a perfect opportunity to let someone from our development squad now come and make a name for themselves, even if they get a couple of game run. When Ben Godfrey came into the side, it was from an injury, and then he was so good, he didn't get out of the
We're
team.
not talking about this fourth centre-back coming in straight away.
No, not
You're talking about somebody, if I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, I'm going to call him Omo. Omo. If Omo comes in and plays well, then there's the potential there. But we're not asking for this player to sort of come in and be our main centre back.
You've also got even the likes of Akin Famewa, who's out on loan. You've got players like that who could easily come in and
in January I think we have the option to recall him, so that could be something we pursue.
But the thing is for me is that I am nervous because if Chris Zimmerman gets injured or if Ben Gibson I saw again another stat which said that I think it was Zimmerman played something like 16 or 14 games and Gibson played 0 last year and Hanley played 14, and so between three defenders you haven't even got enough to make nearly any of the season up.
No.
And to think that they're going to be our only three options, of course injuries can not happen again and plague us this year in that area, but you'd think they'd be a bit more smarter than to leave themselves so short in that area. But I guess we're kind of straying from the point of Zimmerman. But in terms of I guess more individual performances that were disappointing, we've highlighted Zimmerman's start and Pukki kind of really throughout the whole thing. Is there anyone else at all that you can kind of think of, or anyone else?
Initially springs to mind. There's been a lot of mediocre and sort of average performances, but I think those are the two which maybe, rightly or wrongly, have been highlighted the most in terms of negatives.
In terms of surprise starter, we've kind of spoke already about in regards to our most pleasing performances, but in terms of players that we could kind of put under this category, one person I'd like to kind of mention in general is Adam Eder. Because I wouldn't say he's a star, because I don't think he's had the game time to really make himself a star yet. And I think that's why I'm saying I think he's just been a surprise. We all know what he's capable of, but I think we kind of had, like with any player that comes through, we always have higher expectations than really maybe what they're actually... Yeah. And I think the thing is that he could have come into the team and played awfully, and we'd have probably still said he was great, because I think we just naturally are like that, right? But he genuinely has been pretty good when he comes on, right? Like, obviously, first game of the season, he wins that game for us. I know, obviously, there's a lot of, other factors that happened to cause that moment to happen. But he was there, poacher's finish, and he scored, and he was in that position. I think in terms of looking at his kind of cameo performances off the bench, look at Preston, creates a chance out of nothing in terms of the way that he shifts inside and hits a shot, and Plaqueta should score the open goal. If he scores that 2-2 and you've got 15 minutes to go, it's an impactful substitution. And even, whenever he's come on against any other side, he has made a difference. And I think, I wouldn't call him a surprise star, but I think he has the potential to be that surprise star this year.
Yeah, I think all the sort of indications we're getting is that I do think Ida is going to be a promising player for Norwich. And I think he's going to... We might see a similar situation where it takes these young players a little bit of time in terms of the players that aren't necessarily in that first team starting 11 picture at the moment. We saw it last season, didn't we? Max Aarons and Ben Godfrey, Todd Cantwell, when they didn't start the season from the off, did they? In those roles, they grew into them and their opportunities came. And I mean, I'm hoping we'll be sat here in a week or two talking about Adam Ida starting his first Norwich City Championship game.
Yeah.
Whether we are or not, it's a difficult one. I think Farke's reluctant to drop Pookie. I don't know what argument you can really have to say that Pookie deserves to start. It's not to say that Pookie's finished, pardon the pun, or that Pookie doesn't offer anything. I just think he needs a rest. I just think he needs that game off. Take him out of the limelight and allow him to build his confidence up again.
And I think, as well as that, I think other players deserve an opportunity. I think, you can't get caught up in the kind of dramatics of what he's done for us before. You kind of always talk about you don't like looking back into the previous players' histories. You kind of judge it on how they're playing there and then. And, if that's any other player that comes into the squad, they're out of the squad before you know it.
And we're not talking about a situation where the alternatives to Pookie are Dermot and Sabeni. No. We're talking about, a lad in Ida who has got such a high ceiling and has got such high potential. He's playing for his country now regularly. He's scored a senior hat-trick for Norwich. This is somebody who has made a meaningful impact on Norwich City games and is at the very infancy and the very start of his Norwich City career. And you've got Jordan Hugill, who, I have my opinions on Hugill in terms of the signing, but his pedigree in terms of what he's done in the Championship is there to be seen. And, Norwich you're not sort of looking around, going, well, who we got to replace Pookie, Norwich have options there, and I think it's time to use them.
Yeah, I think you've... again, I know we have kind of differing opinions on Hugill, but I think we have two genuine, more than competent strikers.
Well, the thing is with Hugill, your opinion for Hugill is based on him as a player.
Yeah,
and there's no doubt that Hugill is a good Championship striker. My question would be, is he a good Championship striker for Norwich City at that age and that price? I don't see us getting 5 million value off Jordan Hugill at 28 years old. He's our third choice striker at the moment. He doesn't fit currently the way we play. Even if you want to start utilise those crossing, Norwich aren't turning into Burnley all of a sudden. Like there's still a lot of progressive through the thirds on the floor play. And if you want to use Plaqueta and Quintia and maybe Aaron's on the right as well to be more productive with the crossing, fine. But Norwich are more than that, and I think Ida fits that balance well. Of hopefully he can be a little bit aerially dominant and can be productive in that sense, but also can, we know how quick Ida is, we know how good he is in the box, and I think we need to see that.
In terms of to kind of end things off on, we're going to go with a hot take, or maybe one or two, depending on how we're feeling. I think it's always nice to kind of make a really bold prediction because you can kind of say, well, it was bold, so if it goes wrong, don't make me look too bad. But if it goes right, there's always a bold prediction that will come off in every year. If you just sat here and gone after the Leeds game, Norwich will go up that year, you'd have been called mental. But it happens, right? Have you got one lined up? Have you got one? I kind of wish
this question was. We had this question maybe a few weeks earlier, because I think this is something I've heard for a while. I don't know how bold this is now, but I think Lucas Rupp will come out of this season as our best number 8.
Okay.
I don't know how hot that is. I think it would have been a lot hotter and a lot spicier about 2 weeks before. But that's what I'd go for. I think all the credentials are there for him to have a really good season.
I think mine will be one that you don't like and one that will be a bit spicy at the moment as well. I think that Jordan Hugill will be our top goal scorer this season.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that after seeing his performance at Derby, and how lethal he is in the air, and how great of a wand of a left foot Xavi Quintilla have. I can just see it being
I'm not going to hold you to. I'm not going to make you too accountable at the end of the season if that hasn't been the case, because I feel like I haven't ducked out of that, but I don't think that's as hot. My prediction is as hot as yours there.
We've got to have one, right?
Yeah, there's always one who makes an outlandish statement, and I actually have made an outlandish statement about Rupp before, and so maybe So yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like I need to up the ante now. Maybe I'll have one next week. But,
Go for it.
No, I'm confident that Lucas Rupp will be beneficial to Norwich, and I don't know. I can't really think of anything else that I would. All right, maybe mine will be. I think Ida will be Norwich's top goal scorer. I don't know if that's spicy either, but we'll see.
Well, I didn't say how many goals it scored. He'll score 5 when we go down. No, well, I think to be fair, it's one of those ones where I think when you're a striker, you like if anyone would have said Pukki will be your top goal scorer, you'd have gone, no, Jordan Rhodes will.
Yeah, Jordan
exactly
Rhodes is
right.
the man,
So I think always bet against the underdog striker in a Norwich team, and they'll always do you a favour, right?
Who had a bet on Dermot last year then?
Let's not talk about it. In the cup, he did better than Pukki, right? Because Pukki didn't play in the cup. Awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Obviously, it's a little bit different because it's in person, and I don't know how long we're going to be able to do this for, but we're going to try to nonetheless. In terms of if you're listening on either Apple Podcasts, please leave it a review that you feel is fair. And if you're
preferably 5 stars.
And if you're watching on or listening on Spotify, feel free to download it because that's how we can see if you've actually watched it. And likewise, if you're on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time, guys. See you later.
You're a super